What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Gators Recruiting Talk. I'm Keith Niebuhr of Gators Online. That is Corey Bender, also of Gators Online. We've got a good bit to go over. It's not going to be a particularly long show. There isn't any real recruiting news per se, rather recruiting juice, I guess, is what we would have. Kind of guys that are having good seasons so far. We want to talk about them. We want to let you know kind of what the current vibe is of UF recruits right now. What are they thinking with UF off to this 1-2 start? And then we're going to go over also recruits that we think you need to keep an eye on. In other words, which guys are other schools coming after or are going to come after that if Florida keeps slipping or if a coaching change is made at some point, what that could mean for certain guys. So, Corey, first of all, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks, Keith. Thanks for having me on. I hope you're having a good day as well, man.
Oh, it's wonderful, man. It's wonderful. It's weird because, Florida has 19 commitments. Right now, the number 13 class in the country, Corey. Of those 19 commitments, 14 of them are four-star kids. So not a lot of top 50, top 100 type of guys, but overall a good, solid class. But, of course, now Florida doesn't just have to recruit against other schools, and they've got to recruit against their own on-field performance. So we're going to talk a lot about that today. And our first topic, Corey, is kind of just what's the general vibe of the UF commitments right now? You're talking to these guys on a daily basis. Are they worried? Are they like, hey man, are they jumping off the ship? What's the vibe with these dudes right now?
Yeah, Keith, believe it or not, I mean, a lot of them have been optimistic. I mean, there has been many commits in this class that have kind of voiced that, there's a lot of concern or, I don't know what's going to happen with the program or Billy Napier. A lot of them have said, hey, it's how you finish. I know Florida, we talked to one of the commits earlier this week that said, hey, they kind of shot themselves in the foot against LSU, even though, DJ Lagway threw a handful of interceptions. The game was still within striking distance, late in the game. And a lot of them are saying, yeah, it's how you finish. So I think overall, given how it is, especially after that USF loss, you would have kind of thought amongst the commits that maybe would have had guys looking around. That really hasn't had, there's a few kids that still might take visits. We'll talk about that later in the show. But no, it's been fairly optimistic. A lot of these kids are kind of looking to see how they play against Miami. And as of right now, and I think the biggest thing too, Keith, no one's decommitted. So I think for Florida staff, that's a good sign. But I think this weekend, Miami, I think that's the game that will really have a good idea where this class is kind of projecting going forward.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's so many moving parts right now. I mean, if these guys, if Florida wins, obviously that would be hugely significant. If Florida loses, I mean, it's really hard to see a way where the staff survives, if we're just being frank with everybody. But so many moving parts, things haven't really moved in one way or the other yet. They're just sort of staying pat. Anybody that you've talked to that you're like, I don't know, man. I mean, they're saying all the right things. Actually, we're going to get into that a little bit later, guys, to really worry about. But I mean, Corey, you cover the Gators. They know you cover the Gators. So do you get the sense that these guys are guarded? Or do you get the sense they're being open and honest with you? Or is it really impossible to know?
I think in some of them you can tell that they're being honest. I know some of the kids right now aren't really fielding phone calls, and you can kind of look at that as, is that like a red flag? Do they just not want to have to discuss what's going on with the program? But I think a lot of them are. I mean, even before the losses, you had a few of these guys that said, hey, I still, I'm getting recruited by these other schools. I still may take visits. And that was before the USF loss. But I think a lot of them are being honest. I know Tyler Chakeem, the offensive tackle at Georgia, we spoke to him last night, and he said, man, he's just like, it's going to be the way they finish. He's just like, Florida shot themselves in the foot. LSU was, he kept bringing it up. LSU was top 3 in the country, and Florida played them on the road. And I mean, considering how DJ played, Florida was still right there. So I think a lot of these kids, even 2027 prospects, are saying, hey, Florida's still very high on my list. It's still very early in the season. Let's just see how they finish. And like you said, Keith, there's so much more football to be played. But I think a lot of these kids are being truthful, just kind of saying, hey, it's early in the season, especially with the playoff bracket expanding to more teams. Let's see how they finish over a difficult stretch, because if Florida goes on a run, I mean, they have a difficult enough schedule where if they put together a good amount of wins, they could possibly turn this around. But it's a lot to ask. I mean, it's a very difficult schedule.
Yeah, it really is. And before every show, Corey and I kind of do a little prep, and I'm going to ask you this, I'm going to ask you that. But I always tell Corey, don't get ahead of yourself, stick to the topic. And I got ahead of myself. So, Corey, you get to lecture me next time. Corey, so we got the general vibe. The next question, and if I could find this real quick, let's see here. Number 2, topic 2, Which recruits should UF be most concerned about? Now, this is probably going to be the topic that everybody listens to more than any other. They got, again, 19 commitments, 14 are 4-star guys. All right. And some of the 3-star guys, like Desmond Green, the offensive lineman from South Carolina, picked Florida over Georgia. He could have committed to Georgia. Legit kid there. Legit good football player. So these are guys that other schools, no doubt, are kind of waiting to kind of swoop in and pull out of the water and take away. Who should Gator fans be most concerned about? Give me a few guys, and then we can kind of break them down a little bit more individually, if you like, Corey.
Yeah, absolutely, Keith. Yeah, I think tight end Hezzy Kent. I think he's one I'm definitely kind of keeping eyes on. Even in recent weeks, even on his Instagram, he's continuing to post graphics from other schools. And, Florida beat out Miami for his commitment. Early this year, Texas was another school in the mix, Florida State, but it really came down to Florida and Miami. And just with the way Miami's projecting, the way Florida's kind of projecting the other way, he's a guy that we're definitely keeping tabs on. He doesn't do many interviews, but I know our colleague Blake tried to get him after the USF game, and he's declined to talk. So I don't know if that's a bad sign looking at, but he's one. I think running back Carson Baker's another one. Even at the start of the season, he said Kentucky, South Carolina, Florida State, schools like that are still pushing for him, and he didn't rule out taking additional visits. So, since then, obviously Florida's on a 2-game losing streak. Some of these other schools are playing well. So he's another one, and I think a few other ones, Keith, that I think maybe don't get mentioned as much. I think wide receiver Davion Gross. I think he's one, Florida, probably the biggest surprise addition to this class because Oklahoma was trending for so long. Oklahoma's playing fairly well, and Florida, I think largely due to revenue sharing at NIL, was able to come out on top. So with him kind of being further away and Florida struggling, does that kind of push him a little bit away from Florida? Because he's only been to campus, I believe, one time, Keith, and that was for his OV. So he's one. And I think the other one too, Keith, is edge Kevin Ford, KJ Ford, as they say, out of Texas. He's a guy that, Florida got over the summer. Alabama, it was really the day of, Alabama was trending most of the day. Then Florida was able to kind of regain some ground and get him in the fold. And, he was going to take an OV to Oklahoma earlier this season, but that trip actually, thankfully for Florida, fell through. But he still plans to visit Texas A&M, a local school, for the Florida game here in a couple of weeks. So I think there's a handful of these guys that Florida really has to continue recruiting as much as they can, considering, kind of the publicity around the program and where everything's trending. But, yeah, there's definitely a handful of guys we're keeping close tabs on. So
much stuff, like we said, so many moving parts. Can Billy Napier survive? Well, if he wins the next 3 games, guys, he's probably going to survive. It seems like a long shot, obviously, the way Florida has produced so far this season, but it theoretically could happen. But obviously that could help hold the class together. You've got him not surviving, which means Billy and most of the staff would be gone. And if you then don't retain a coach, when do you relieve him? Is it mid-season, late season, end of season? Do recruits stick? Who do they talk to? Are they talking to the assistants at UF? Are they talking more to NIL people these days? There's so many things that kind of some unknown things there. Would a new coach want them? It's a lot of stuff to kind of process here from our point of view. So we're kind of can just only focus on the here and now. Right now, Florida's 1-2. Right now, Billy Napier and his staff are in Gainesville. You can play the what if game all day long. It's hard. And obviously, it's kind of weird, Corey, when you're interviewing a kid to say, well, what if these guys get fired? I mean, you sound like a jerk, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So you have to ask it in a way that's respectful, both to a current staff and also to the young man's intelligence, So many moving parts. Again, I've mentioned that like 10 times already. I'm beating a dead horse. Carson Baker. Now, this was a guy, Florida's running back recruiting has been very good. Good evaluations. They're getting kind of diamonds in the rough. And he, you like him a lot. You evaluated his film. He said, hey, you even wrote it this summer. Hey, I think this is a guy that could maybe play early in his career. And so what's happened this season isn't the way it's played out on the field for Florida, not only with the record, Corey, but with the running back production. Jade Baugh's doing his thing. Nobody else has any really good statistics. Florida didn't run the ball much last game. Katie Daniels, who was supposed to be the third-string running back, everybody thought, is barely getting the ball at all. Duke Clark, a true freshman, played a little bit last week. So it's kind of like, this kid's got to be – I wonder what's going through his mind right now, because of what he thought UF would be on the ground and what UF has been on the ground. And then also FSU's making a push, and they're running the ball They've only played 2 games, but running the ball extremely well. Is FSU. That's a lot. I said a lot, Corey, to say a little. Who's the team to watch with Carson Baker, Florida? I think it's going to be FSU. I think that's the one team that could maybe give Florida a run here. What do you think?
No, I agree with you, Keith. Yeah, I think the 3 schools to monitor the most, but FSU for sure. I think that's the biggest threat. They kind of, even before he committed to Florida, he took the OV to Florida State. I believe that was his last one before he committed to Florida. And even as he was committed to Florida, there was one time on his Instagram a few weeks ago where he just posted a picture of him in the Seminoles gear just by itself, no caption, nothing to it. And you and I talked about this, kind of was like, well, that's interesting. There's nothing to it. But, he's posting that. And I know Chad Simmons, our colleague, visited him at school, and he had an FSU backpack on. And he told Chad, hey, it's nothing to worry about. It's just recruiting. I'm having fun. But to me, I mean, you can say all that, but I still think that's notable. You still have to bring that up. So, with Florida State, obviously, I think them beating Alabama in week 1 really helped them in recruiting as far as kind of showing, hey, we can win these big marquee matchups. So with Florida trending one way, FSU kind of having more of the positive buzz, I think for sure FSU is definitely the one to kind of look out for him, and they're recruiting him very, very hard. And he was going to visit, Baker was going to visit for that game. I think thankfully for Florida he didn't, but obviously several more home games to go, and he could still get to Tallahassee at some point.
Well, the other thing is, and I need to do a closer examination of FSU's roster, but I'm pretty sure they don't have the stable running backs Florida does. Does FSU convince him, hey, look, Duke Clark's playing already. Katie Daniels waiting in the wings. Jaden Ball's going to be back. Maybe they're, I don't know that, who knows what they're trying to sell him right now, but Florida's got to win some games, man. I mean, that's the big thing right now. Hezzy Kent, tight end. Now, this is Corey. This is the guy, you mentioned him as your first guy to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Florida over Miami and Texas. But he's like 6'6", 300 pounds, and he's a tight end. He's listed as a tight end. And so, again, perfect example of what if a coaching change is made. Would a new staff have an offense that fits him as a tight end? And if not, would they want him as an offensive tackle? He wants to play tight end, for one thing. And 2, they may not want him to play tight end. And 3, they may not want him to play offensive tackle, even if he says, okay, I'll play offensive tackle. So to me, it's guys like him that are the most fascinating to track as the season progresses. And we learn more and more each week about the future of the Florida program and who's going to be in charge, right? So again, there's so many things at play here, and this game this weekend could determine a lot of it. Corey, here's something that I don't know how to answer, and maybe you do, maybe you don't. But with NIL, can NIL convince kids that are committed? Let's say there's a coaching change made. Hey, wait it out, man. Wait out. Kids and their agents, by the way. Wait it out, see who they hire, or is that part of the game not going to change? Coaching changes made, guys are going to decommit. We've already seen a bunch of UCLA guys decommit this week. Now, they're probably not at the level of the Florida commits, quite frankly, but these Florida kids would have options. So is it just not even, is NIL not even in play here? Do we not know? This is kind of new. This would be Florida's first, if it happens, coaching change within this NIL dynamic. You know what I mean? I don't even know if I answered that well.
No, I think it definitely doesn't hurt, Keith. I mean, you might have some guys, I think, when you look at like a Kendall Gervil, who, as we reported, his recruitment was largely due to, NIL and, revenue sharing. And I think it definitely doesn't hurt compared to several years ago where it really wouldn't be a discussion. But I still think there's going to be a lot of these guys that are still getting offers in the same ballpark as Florida, maybe a little bit less or maybe even more. That makes them say, well, I can find stability elsewhere and I can get paid what I think what I deserve. Yeah. So I think it definitely helps to a degree, but then I think you made a good point, Keith. Like, will it matter, especially if the new coaching staff maybe doesn't want that kid? It makes me think of like Jaden Gibson, like about a handful of years ago out of West Orange, a wide receiver, ended up signing Oklahoma. Big time guy that you thought would have been a no-brainer that Billy Napier staff would have wanted, but they eventually basically kind of moved on from him. Nick Evers, a quarterback, same type of situation. So, I mean, the NIL and all the people in the background could be saying, hey, hold on. But, at the same time, what if the new staff doesn't want them? It's really just time wasted. So it's very difficult to kind of gauge that.
If you move on from a coach, let's just suppose it's a disaster down in Miami Gardens this weekend. If you move on from a coach early in the season, the first thing people think of is, well, guys are going to enter the transfer portal. But you got to think about this too. That window between this weekend and signing day, that's a long time to stay committed to a program that doesn't have a coach, and you don't know who the next coach is going to be. So that's something to keep track of. The other side of that is people may say, I don't care. I'm ready to start fresh. But a new coach certainly would have his hands full. If you get rid of a coach in week 10, that's less time for guys to just jump off the ship. Now, they can commit at any time. But again, the minute a coach leaves, I know what I'm trying to say. I don't know if I'm illustrating this well, but the minute the coach is gone, man, people are, even with NIL, I mean, you got to figure some of these guys. I mean, I'm sure NIL on a guy like Kendall Gervil, the four-star defensive lineman, I'm sure they're going to say, listen, ride it out, wait to see the next coaches. You can go anywhere. There's no point in decommitting. But I just wonder what kind of effect, how many people they're going to be able to convince of that if this, in fact, happens. And right now, it doesn't look great for the staff, if we're being honest. Now, at times last year, it didn't look great for the survival of the staff. And they made it. They got the vote of confidence from AD Scott Strickland. And then they went on to win 4 games at the end of the season. Corey, I was a little surprised you didn't mention Kendall Gervil in one of the guys to track. Are you feeling like the NIL's got him locked up because everybody and look, every school is going to want him? Or did you just, I mean, I don't know. You tell me, because we continue to hear that Texas still intends to keep trying to chip away at him. So what do you think?
I think part of the reason too, Keith, with defensive lineman Kendall Gervil, it's also like he keeps saying he's locked in, everything's good with Florida, but I know the injury is kind of what kept me off a little bit.
Okay.
Just knowing like how hard are some of these schools really going to put, like you mentioned, Texas, how hard's some of these schools really going to push for him? Is it going to be an offer that's better than what Florida gave him? And we don't have official reports. I mean, I know some people have thrown around the 1 million mark, a little bit less than that. I mean, a kid who had a pretty good injury that's going to be out for maybe 12 months. Will another school surpass that and kind of, go off, hey, I think this guy's going to come back to 100%, which I'm sure he will, but I just don't know where, with him not playing his senior year, if someone will really surpass what maybe Florida's giving him on the NIL and revenue sharing side. So, he's definitely one I think about, as far as with other schools, but Florida probably got him in the boat at the right time. And I just don't know if another school surpassed that, but maybe so. But he's one when it comes to that. I mean, we know that's what that recruitment was largely driven by.
It's a difficult show to do because of the uncertainty. Mm-hmm. It's we were trying to figure out what would be the best topics to talk about, and yet some of the best topics we don't necessarily have any answers because of there's so many unknown variables. But anyway, topic 3, good stuff, Corey. Topic 3. Gators, Canes, recruiting implications, and that kind of is a wide net of what that could, what kind of fits under that. In the 2026 class, Hezzy Kent, tight end you mentioned, could be one guy that maybe we keep an eye on if Miami wanted to, still dig in there. Anybody else in the 2026 class, or is it really the implications recruiting-wise from this game more about the future classes? Bill, that both these staffs have inroads with 2027 kids and 28 kids in the state of Florida, and whoever wins this game sort of gets to say, look, we're the program doing this and the other one's not. Is it more about the future than the current class?
Yeah, I would say so, Keith. I think right now, the 27s, I mean, we're already at that point now where the 27 class is starting to heat up more and more, especially with a lot of these 2026 classes filled up for many schools. But I still think tight end Hezzy Kent, he's the main one. I think definitely because, Miami's still actively recruiting him. He's a kid that really doesn't comment on recruiting at all. So he's kind of a question mark right now. And as of now, he's not on Miami's visitors list for this weekend, but it's something we can maybe keep track of going forward. I think cornerback CJ Hester, he's maybe possibly one that we can monitor. I mean, he says all the right things about Florida, but I think at the same time, Florida was on top before secondary coach Will Harris was in Gainesville, and then he went to Miami. That relationship was largely, that was probably why Florida was on top early on his recruitment. He could still technically take an OV to Miami if Miami wants to go that route. His recruitment over the summer came down to Georgia and Iowa, mostly Florida and Iowa, but Georgia was in the mix too. But if Miami maybe kind of increases this pursuit with him, he's another guy to kind of look at. I think right now, CJ Hester, but mostly Hezzy Kent. I know Janari Carr, Chancellor Campbell, Javari Lucas, all offensive linemen in Florida's class. They all got offered early in the process, but just like Florida, Miami
offered by Miami. You mean
offered by Miami? Yeah.
Okay.
So but right now Miami, if I'm not mistaken, has 6 offensive line commitments. So that doesn't seem likely. So I think right now it's Hezzy Kent and then the 2027 class.
Sorry about that. So there's not a lot of guys in this class maybe that Miami was really in the mix when they picked Florida.
Surprisingly not. Yeah. I mean, usually every year we can probably do a breakdown of
Yeah.
5 guys, or probably this year you would think there'd be 3 to 5 names that we can say in Florida's class, but it's mostly, tight end as you can.
Of course, Miami beat Florida last year and also beat Florida for Drake Stubbs, Hilton Drake Stubbs, the 4-star safety from Jacksonville Mandarin, who then ultimately later flipped to Florida. But Corey, man, do you sense that if Florida doesn't win this game, look, obviously, if they don't win this game, we know where this is headed, right? This is what the end looks like if they don't win, but we don't know when that would be. But do you sense that when you talk to recruits after UF potentially loses this, let's just hypothetically, let's say UF loses this game, do you then sense that now you're going to get a little bit more apprehension, a little more uncertainty in their voices? Are they? I mean, they're holding firm now, but do you think this could be the one game where when you're talking to him, you say, okay, I think now I got to really track this guy?
Yeah, I think so, Keith. I think it could have been last week.
They're smart kids, obviously.
Yeah, I think it could have been last week against LSU if Florida would have got blown out by LSU. Even though DJ had 5 interceptions, Florida was still not – they weren't technically blown out in that game. So now Miami's the next one. I think even if Florida plays it really close, it's tough to call. I think if Florida loses pretty convincingly, I think the wheels could definitely fall off where you're either going to see some recruits just maybe not do many interviews and they're more quiet. You might see a few guys reopen the recruitment and say all the right things like, hey, I'm still considering Florida, but, I need to explore other options. Okay. But I think for sure, Keith, I think many people would have thought the USF game was one, but I think many people pause saying, okay, cool, you have LSU and Miami ahead. If they can rebound in those games, hopefully people can slowly forget about the US game to a degree. But I think here at the Miami game this weekend, just because it's an in-state battle, so many big-time recruits in the stands, and we all know, right now, Florida, they would go to 1-3 with 1 win over Long Island. And I just don't see how the wheels don't fall off regardless. If it's if it's a 2-touchdown game they lose by, I think that's the limit for me.
Yeah. Well, at some point, it's not just what they're seeing on the field; it's the record and knowing what the record means to Billy Napier's
100%.
Future. Again, these kids, they follow this stuff. They read your stuff. They read my stuff. They read all the other sites. They know that the chatter is out there. They're not naive to that, but they also know that there's not that it's not over yet. All right, and technically, again, Florida could win this weekend. So, Corey, what if Florida wins this weekend? What would that do? What kind of boost would that give this staff right now? The class is almost all done, but in terms of holding on to these guys, what would that do? In terms of maybe landing 1 or 2 more guys, what would that do? Kids like this staff. They like these coaches. The NIL situation in Gainesville appears to be strong. Otherwise, they wouldn't be getting the dudes they're getting. So what would a win mean? How significant would it mean? Or is it still we're at that point now where then that could be followed by a loss and we're talking about the same stuff in 2 weeks? You know what I mean?
I think it'd be huge, Keith. Honestly, I do. I think you kind of look, I think maybe some people disagree just thinking the last 2 losses were bad, but I think if Florida can kind of battle adversity, just to say they came back, they put those 2 losses behind them and somehow pulled out a victory at Miami against a very good Miami team this year too. I think it would be huge. I think, like we noticed before, what we mentioned before, Florida hasn't had any decommitments yet, which is kind of surprising. So I think if they can go on the road and get a big statement win with a lot of big-time recruits in the stands, I think I'm not going to say it kind of brings everything back to square one, but then after this, you have Texas at home. You have a bye week and then Texas at home. So I think that would give, obviously, the program so much confidence. And I know with Arch Manning, there's a lot of uncertainty with his play. Playing in the swamp, that's not going to be easy task for that Longhorns team. So I think if Florida, regardless if it's a big win or they did win by 3 points, I think it would probably boost this team up to a degree that we can't really imagine. But I think with recruits, I think it definitely, you would hear a lot of positive feedback. I really do. Maybe some people disagree with that, but I think it would do a lot for the program if they can win.
Well, look, and then you got an off week, and then you got Texas at home. If you go into Texas 1-3, your visitors list is still going to be pretty good because it's Texas. But at that point, you have to be thinking, are they coming to see Texas?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But if Florida's 2-2 off of a win over number 4 Miami, that would be a top 5 win. Again, Florida hasn't beaten a top 10 Miami team ever in its history. But if Florida beats number 4 Miami, Again, that gets Florida to 2-2. It kind of cools the hot seat talk at least for a couple of weeks because, again, Florida's got an off week before it plays Texas. And then you say, all of a sudden to recruits, you can sell that Florida-Texas game again, not just to go see Texas, but to come see Florida and Texas.
Yep.
And if you pull that off, who knows? I think they've got to win, Corey, to continue this thing. I think they've got to win at least 2 of the next 3.
For
right?
sure.
The problem to me is, and we'll get off the recruiting talk here for 1 second. If you lose this game, I think you lose all confidence going into the next game. Makes the next game even harder. So to me, the Miami game is key to everything, especially on the recruiting trail. Corey, that Florida-Texas game, if Florida's 2-2 coming off a win at Miami, you could be talking about one of the better visitors lists we've seen in a long time, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, even in weeks prior, the beginning of the season, a lot of these kids, when you ask them, even in August, saying, hey, when are you going to get to the Swamp? So many kids locked in itinerary for that weekend. So as of now, I mean, it's supposed to be a very jam-packed visitors list. I mean, like you said, Keith, if they lose in Miami, I think many of those things could kind of change. And it's probably still going to be a decent list, but it also will depend on Billy Napier's the coach. I mean, if they have an interim coach and, they obviously have to play that game, I think you're still going to have some good recruits there. But yeah, if you can beat Miami, I think the visitor list is going to be probably one of the better ones we've seen in the last couple of years.
Look, the reality is if you've got an interim coach and you've got visitors there, what good's it going to – they're going to
100%.
see the atmosphere, which most of them have already seen before. They're going to see the facilities, which most of them have all seen before. Other than that, you're just twisting.
Not many local kids either. So it's like, who wants to kind of make the travel plans to fly?
Yeah, they got to win this week, man. I
100%.
mean, for Florida recruiting to hold it together. I know I asked all the NIL stuff later. Could that have any impact? But for all intents and purposes, they really got to figure out a way to get a win this week and get these kids thinking about Florida again. They're going to lose confidence in Florida and the staff, and they're going to be reading all the stories that say this guy's in trouble. Okay. And anyway, all right, topic 4, on to something a little bit more positive. Okay. Corey, which commits are shining in 2025? And I want you to start with the quarterback commitment, Will Griffin, 4-star kid out of Tampa Jesuit. I saw him play earlier this year. He played great. I only was there for the second half against Fort Myers Bishop Verot. He went over 10,000 career yards on the same night. He passed Tim Tebow on the state's all-time passing list. He's in the top 10. Obviously, an interesting recruit because a new coach, let's say, again, throwing out these hypotheticals, which somewhat seems unfair to the current staff, but we sort of have to do it. Man, guys know what they like in quarterbacks, know what they don't like in quarterbacks. So Will Griffin is probably watching this thing closer than any Florida commitment, right, to see what's going on. Because if this staff, which loves him, isn't here, he doesn't know whether he's going to be a Gator, and he wants to be a Gator. Okay, this is a kid that grew up a Gator fan. But how is Will Griffin playing this year, Corey?
Yeah, so I mean, over 700 yards passing, Keith, 7 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. So he's been efficient. And I think the one thing I've always mentioned with Will Griffin too, man, is that he plays against good competition.
Yeah.
He doesn't play against, lackadaisical competition. So he's always playing against good guys out there. He's been efficient this year. I feel from what I've kind of seen in his highlight films as well. Really good ball placement downfield, just making better decisions. I mean, that wasn't a weakness before, but you can kind of see him in the pocket. You can tell there's a different level of confidence with him as a senior. He's a Florida commit. I mean, you can tell he's a guy, he knows he's running the show over there at Jesuit. So with all eyes on him, and especially with the more inexperienced wide receiver core, I know he told me before the season, that's where some of the replacements were going to be. Some of their experienced guys graduated last year. So some of these new guys had to step up. And so far, Will's made it definitely easier on a lot of those guys. So I think 7 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. I mean, he'll be at 1,000 yards before we know it, maybe potentially after tomorrow. He's having a great start to his senior year, man. And I think if you're Florida, you have to like that. I mean, he's not regressing at all, and he's getting better and better in a lot of those categories.
I mean, the kid's going to end up with over 12,000 career passing yards. I think when he was a 9th and 10th grader, very young guy, I want to say that his mistakes were generally passes over the middle and late. If my memory's right, I'm sure if I'm not, Will or his dad will let me know that I'm wrong. I'm just joking, but I do text back and forth with his dad a good bit. But he's going to end up with over 12,000 career passing yards. Like you said, Jesuit plays a very good schedule every year. In fact, just this year, we mentioned the game, Fort Myers Bishop Verot. Well, that team's always good. And I want to say a week or two later, Tampa Jesuit played up in Georgia at famed Valdosta High School in front of 8 to 10,000 people. So he is used to playing in big games against big competition. He's supremely confident. I thought when I saw him in week 1 that he was throwing the ball as well as I've ever seen him throw the ball. So I think he's a kid who's on the rise. But again, he's going to be watching this close, and we're going to do our best to talk to Will in the next couple of weeks and get his thoughts on what's going on with the Florida program. You want to give some of these guys a little bit of space. You don't want to plant the seed of negativity in their heads at all time. We could talk about it, but we don't need to be flushing it, down them all the time. But anyway, Corey, who else you think's having a good senior season?
Yeah, running back Carson Baker. I mean, right now, almost about 350 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns. I think, if I'm not mistaken, around 100 yards receiving, and I think another touchdown. And going to the season, Keith, I mean, he's a guy with track speed, a guy who can really take it to the end zone in a flash. But I think a lot of people said, well, look at his junior film, is he's a guy who can really get to the outside around the offensive tackles, and he was kind of just, he can put on the gas right there. A lot of people said, hey, I want to see him kind of run more inside between the tackles. I think when you watch his film so far as a senior, I mean, he's doing an outstanding job with that. I think, reacts very well, has that suddenness inside. It can really make cuts at the last second. And that's where a lot of his big runs have happened this year. I think it was 2 weeks ago. I was so impressed with this film, man. I mean, he had a lot of those carries inside where he had to react right at the stop of a dime and kind of make that cut. And if he doesn't make that cut at a certain time, he gets stopped. And he was taking a lot of those runs to the house too, man. So he's a guy with speed, size, and the guy is getting better and better when it comes to dissecting defenses with his vision. And he's a guy I think he's only going to get better and better. And it's showing in the rankings too right now. I mean, he's cementing himself, especially with Rivals.com, as one of the best backs in the country. So I think it's definitely well-deserved. And another one too, Keith, worth mentioning, tight end Hezzy Kent. Right now, I think he's about 250 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns. And then 2 rushing touchdowns as well. I've been vocal about it. I don't think he's a tight end at the next level. When you watch him off the line and just his fluidity getting in and out of his routes, he kind of looks like a guy in the trenches who's playing tight end. But once he gets north and south, I mean, he's like a bus going downhill. I mean, he picks up a lot of momentum. And he, like you said, Keith, before, 6'6", over 300 pounds, he's a load to bring down. But as we know, he said it many times, if you're going to recruit me for offensive line, I don't want to go to your school. I mean, Alabama was a school he liked for much of the process, and they mentioned moving offensive line, and all of a sudden Alabama was not on his list of top schools. So he's a very interesting prospect. I don't know if you kind of rotate between tight end and H-back, or do you just get him to campus and just let it all figure itself out? I mean, if he kind of keeps getting bigger and say he's at 320, I mean, as much as he wants to play tight end, I just don't see that as realistic, but we'll see how it all plays out. He's an interesting prospect.
You mentioned Carson Baker earlier, and I should bring this up. He plays for Fairburn, Georgia, Langston Hughes High School. Really good program, just on the west outer edge of Atlanta, not far from Westlake, where former Gators quarterback Cam Newton played. But I bring this up because Langston Hughes High School is very good, and they beat the living snot out of most of the teams they play. And so he doesn't really put up great statistics in a lot of these games because he doesn't need to play the full game. Carson Baker's statistics will probably get better deeper into the season as he's playing all 4 quarters and playoff games and big region games and things like that. One other recruit I want to mention, Corey, and I'll just finish it up here. Justin Williams, 4-star receiver from Gainesville Buchholz. Committed to Florida, obviously, over the summer. I actually spent some time last week down in Vero Beach and chatted with Vero Beach head coach Lenny Jankowski, who faced Buchholz earlier this season and last season. And he says that Justin Williams is a bona fide, legit dude, and he thinks he's an absolute surefire SEC starter. Someday couldn't have been more impressed with him. Said their whole defensive game plan was about how do we slow and maintain this guy. So good things this season out of Justin Williams. Well, Corey, that's it, man. We covered a lot. And unfortunately, a lot of it wasn't positive. Maybe Florida will get a win this weekend, and we'll have something more uplifting to talk about next week. But for now, if you like what we're doing, hit the like and subscribe button down below. And also go to GatorsOnline.com for more great intel, scoop, and recruiting overall coverage every single day. Again, we wanted to kind of do a show this week just because we didn't do one last week. There's just not a ton to talk about, so we hope you enjoyed this nonetheless. And like I said, hopefully Florida can go out there and put on a good show this Saturday night at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens. A lot of kids are going to be watching. They want to see if Florida can turn this thing around. For Corey Bender, I am Keith Niebuhr. This was the Gators Recruiting Talk Show. We'll do it again next week. Take care.